Welcome to class. I hope you had a great weekend. We have a lot to do today. So first off, you need to be at learningcatalytics.com. This you can go in through my accounting lab. Probably a better way in is just to go to learningcatalytics.com. Put the session ID that is on the screen. It's 937358820. That session ID will change every single class. If you're watching this recording later, that session ID will not work. You cannot get into Learning Catalytics unless we're having a live class and you have that session ID. Upon occasion, we might have two separate session IDs within a given class. But when you log in right now, when you log in, you should see a question asking you how your weekend was, and you would put in your one-word answer. Today, participation credit, you earn participation credit for participating. There are no right or wrong answers today. It's like our training wheels, and that will probably continue for a few more days. I will let you know when we start grading for accuracy. My hope is that everyone tries hard and gets their answers in, and then I don't want to make it like stressful, like do I have to get the right answer? So do your best, play along as we go through class. You need to enter answers as we go to earn credit. So this is our last day that we have anyone in class to help. So if you have any problems with anything, this is your opportunity. After today, it'll be Haley and I, and we won't be able to do a lot of hands-on help because we have a lot going on. And after today, so after today, everyone should have Wi-Fi. The network engineers have been here with us in class every day. We should be all set. Everything should be operational. Learning Catalytics, probably your best way to get into it, the way I get into it, is just go learningcatalytics.com and log in with my Accounting Lab username and password. So right now, as I'm looking at Learning Catalytics, we have 190 students logged on. So that's not quite everyone. That is by no means everyone. So we're going to get off to a little bit of a slow start right here, but I want to make sure, is everyone in Learning Catalytics? I know the answer is no, but I can just tell. We have 190 people, which counts as people online and in class. So not only do you have to be logged on, but you see a question. To get credit for the question, you need to provide an answer. Keep in mind that this is not anonymous. Okay? So your answer is being recorded. It's not going to be displayed to the answers will be. But so you need to earn credit for this question right now. You need to participate. So we have 190. What are we up? Did we go up anymore? Oh, I see it on mine. 190 students. We have 113 responses. Okay. So hopefully you've responded. We're going to close the question. Okay. Yeah. And if you come in late ever in the semester, just when you come in, go into learningcatalytics.com and wait, and you will see the session ID appear. I think, can you hit refresh? It's not showing up on mine. No, yeah, there it is. It went. Did you, yeah, you pushed it out, right? You guys are getting it on your devices? Yeah, okay. So, great. We have some good answers there. So I'm glad everyone had a good weekend. Speaking of weekends, I just want to give you a heads up. This weekend I am moving. After 22 years, I am moving to Kent. I love downtown Kent. So I'm moving to Kent. So the reason I'm telling you that is because Email can be a little delayed. We're hoping that Time Warner shows up when they're supposed to hook up internet. So things are going to be a little chaotic in my life. So if I don't get back to you as fast as normal, please understand that's why. So that's my fun weekend that I will be having. So next, okay, want to talk about, do we want to, okay, what's due this Saturday? The only thing that's due this Saturday is Chapter 1, Part 2 homework. When you participate in learning catalytics in here every day, for lack of a better word, I call that a pop quiz. We will have learning catalytics in here every day, and that's what functions as a quiz each day. If you are in Section 3 and watching this later, that you have a quiz in my accounting lab, but that doesn't include the vast majority, everyone in front of me and online. This is your quiz for the week. After a couple hours after class, you'll be able to go into Learning Catalytics and review any of the questions and the answers, so you have access to those. Within later today or tomorrow, you will see the points for today show up in my accounting lab. And it's simply a participation effort at this point. As long as you answer all the questions, you get all the credit. So those will show up in my accounting lab. Once I have transferred those to my accounting lab, I will send an announcement out so you can check to make sure they're showing up where you expect it to be. So just watch for that, and I'd like it if you would check to make sure it's okay. And I will see. So that will happen today, tomorrow, sometime. I'm not sure. I haven't done that transfer yet. I expect it to go well. So let's see. We have another Learning Catalytics question. Can you do this? Start sharing. Which one is? Yeah. Okay, now I pushed out a question in Learning Catalytics. Again, if you came in late and didn't see the session ID, whenever we do a session, you will see the session ID up there. And this question, when you enter your answer, you will be typing in the number. Do not type a $sign in. In this case, there are no decimal places, so don't put decimal places in. Just put in the number. If this were to be a 4-digit number, don't put the comma in, just put the numbers in. So when we have a numeric answer, I will tell you how many decimal places, 0. Do not use $signs. And put in your answer. If liabilities are 500 and assets are 1,200, what is equity? So this is going back to the accounting equation. Okay, we're up to 310 students, so great. Okay, anyone need any help? Right now, out of 313, approximately we have 290. That means right now we have 10 or 15 people who have not answered. This is really easy credit, so get your answer in. Yeah. Yes. Help is coming behind you. Okay, everyone else set? Okay, let's close this one. It's online. If you could see Haley, this is interesting. She has an iPad in her lap. She's chatting and marking things down on paper as well. So, okay, so our answer here was 700. And you can see, you should be able to see the work on your device. It'll show you the notes. Assets equal liabilities plus equity. So we have 1,200 equals 500 plus equity. solving for equity, $700. Okay, so 700 is our answer there. We have one more we're going to try, and then we'll get into the material for today. Okay, if equity is 3,500 and assets are 5,700, how much is total debt? Remember, total debt is the same thing as total liabilities. Again, no dollar sign in your answer and no commas. And I do too. Pardon me? No, no comma. No dollar sign, no comma. If you already put a comma, no one's put a comma in. If you put a dollar sign in your answer, it will be counted as wrong, which today does not matter, but in the future it will. So no dollar signs, no commas, just numbers. And no decimal places either, which I don't think we have anyone right now. Well, I mean, if we have a problem that requires a decimal place, I'll tell you, but otherwise assume no decimal places. So right now we have 302 responses. We're waiting on 10 or 15 people. And of my responses, 91% are correct. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and close this one. Okay, so assets equal liabilities plus equity, filling in what we know. We have assets of 5,700 equal to liabilities plus 3,500 of equity. So then we solve for liabilities and we get 2,200. And again, you see on your, I pushed out the notes on that. Now, this was the accounting equation. These are very, very straightforward questions. You should be able to manipulate the accounting equation to solve for the unknown. We're going to see it again later today. We're going to see it actually the whole semester. So that's one of those fundamental concepts you're going to have to see. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get into the material. In just a moment, I'm going to be switching here. Okay, so speaking of the accounting equation brings me to another reminder I had. Now, what we've decided to do on Fridays is Haley and I do a supplemental session on Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. It doesn't actually go till 9. It's 8:30 or 8:45. But she's at home, I'm at home, and we're just having a session. If you'd like to join us, you're welcome to join us. We do record it, and what we're doing here is we are doing extra homework problems that we don't do in class. Most people might be able to do those problems on their own, but then others would want some additional help with them. So we go through some more homework problems that we don't go through in class. I will talk more about things in that session. It's not new content as much as going further in depth. So it's meant to be helpful. If you are interested, you can attend. We might use learning catalytics during it, but it doesn't count for anything. It's not required. There's no credit earned by going. If probably will not use learning catalytics for it. I'm just thinking, but it's on Blackboard Collaborate, so you're welcome to join us if you're interested. We do record the session, and we do put it, it's in Blackboard Collaborate recordings. We also put it in YouTube, and that's this Friday. It'll take a little bit longer because I'm not sure where I'll be, but we'll have it on YouTube. And when I put it on YouTube, I do type in the description on YouTube what homework problems I covered in there, so you know. Like if you're doing the homework and you come to one that you don't recognize, you might want to check the YouTube channel and see what we covered. For example, last Friday we went over short exercise 1-8. We went over exercise 1-17A. This Friday we're going to do at least one homework problem in that session. So it's just meant to be extra help if you need it. You can browse through what makes sense for you. So again, totally optional. It's meant to take the place of a tutoring session that might or may not fit into your schedule. This is just extra content. There will be no announcements during there that aren't publicized another way. So again, if you don't go, you're not missing required material, but it's designed to be helpful. So that's that. And we talked about the accounting equation more then and did some questions then too. And again, if you have any questions, if you're struggling with the material, if you email me, the earlier the better, but certainly by Thursday afternoonish, I can possibly tailor the session for you. If there's something you'd like to go over in particular, I'd be happy to do that. I just need a little bit of lead time. And it starts at 8 a.m. on Friday. We are done before 9, probably 8:30, 8:45, somewhere in there. And this Friday, Haley and I are doing it together as always. She's at home. I'm wherever I am, and we will switch off. So this will be your opportunity to hear Haley. She's going to do part of this Friday, so we'll be handing the vocals back and forth between she and I. So you'll hear, if you want to hear Haley talk, come on Friday. She can talk, yeah. And Haley's actually going to do one of our classes. One of these class periods later this fall, we'll switch roles. So I'll get the online moderating, and she'll get to teach. So that'll be kind of fun. And so with that, any questions before we get started? Again, participation credit today. My hope is that this runs pretty well. I like the training wheels so that you don't have to stress out over real, what's the absolute right answer. So hopefully this will work. Now, this slide is kind of backwards, but it's in the learning objective order. This talks about the various statements. Today we are focusing on 3 financial statements of the 4. I want to point this slide out for 2 reasons. Number 1, all these PowerPoints are on Blackboard, so you can download it. Number 2, this is Exhibit 1-6 in your textbook. There is no reason to be scrambling to write all this down because it's too much to write down. Also, remember everything's recorded that we do, so you are not losing this when I zoom by it. You have a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper you can use on the exam. You can write on it front and back. The reason I bring this up now is oftentimes when we're in class, I will point out things that if I were taking this exam, what I would make sure would be on my sheet. This is an excellent example of what should be on your sheet. This is a really good summary of number 1, the 4 financial statements. We have 4 financial statements: income statement, statement of retained earnings, balance sheet, and statement of cash flows. And they go in that order. So this is in the right order. The column before the name of the statement gives you the basic question that financial statement is answering. And then the statement to the right of it gives you the basic kind of formula for that statement. And we are going to see this. We're going to talk about this as we do each statement. So I'm not going to talk about this slide in particular, but I did want to highlight it as a really good summary of what we're doing today. Now we are going, in this chapter, we're going to do the income statement, the statement of retained earnings, and the balance sheet. That 4th statement, statement of cash flows, very, very interesting statement, maybe one of the more useful statements, but we're not going to cover it right now because we don't have the basic understanding necessary to get there. So we're going to do the statement of cash flows towards the end of the semester. So the fact that we're not discussing it in depth today, it shouldn't be alarming to you. It's just I want to leave it for later. So today we're going to do the income statement, the statement of retained earnings, and the balance sheet. And then this is our highlights page, Exhibit 1-6 in your text. So when we do the statements, they go in the order, and this is kind of just redundant to what I just said. The income statement, the net income from the income statement goes to the statement of retained earnings. The statement of retained earnings ends with ending retained earnings, and that goes on to the balance sheet. The cash balance from the balance sheet goes on to the statement of cash flows. So they have to be recorded in that order. They have to be prepared in that order, and we're going to go through all 4 of them today. Okay, so we're on there. So what we're going to do first, okay, don't be writing this down. We're going to talk about each one of these items. I just want to say we're doing the income statement first. Okay, so we are on income statement. And we're going to do an income statement by going through an actual homework problem. And this is a good one because it's really little. Short exercise 1-10. This exercise is on your homework. All the exercises we do today are on your homework. They will be different numbers. When you go to do your homework, you will have different numbers displayed. But they will work the same way. Also, heads up, this occurs to me to tell you, the homework this week will take significantly longer than last week. It's not going to be hours and hours for most people, but you do need to devote some time to it. On your exam, homework problems will be on there. Your homework problems will be on your exam. Okay? So when you do the homework, you may be getting an email from me that says, you didn't get 95% on the homework. What's wrong with you? I mean, hopefully I say it nicer. But when I'm asking you about why you didn't get 95% on the homework, that's kind of the line in my own head. If you can't do the homework, when you have the help me solve this, when you have your notes, when you have the recording, if you can't do it in that environment and do it well, you are really going to have trouble on the exam. You're going to see these problems on the exam. So that's the number one reason. Number two, your homework points and participation points for class are the easiest points you'll earn in this class. The homework and the participation points, or the quizzes, whatever we call, combined count for 2 exams. I think equivalent. I'm just trying to think in my head here. I think they count the equivalent of 2 exams. Those are 2 things, absolutely, positively, 100%, pretty much given. You do the homework. We do the homework in class and optional sessions on Friday. There's a help me solve this. There's an ask my instructor. You get 100% on the homework. You're here in class every day participating along. You get 100% on that, pretty close. We drop your 3 lowest quizzes, so if you miss a day here or there, there's a drop. But those are 2 ways that you can beef up your grade to have close to 100% on the equivalent of 2 exams. Gives you a little bit of wiggle room on those 3 exams then. So that's why if I seem harsh when I email you and say, what's up, why do you only get 95%? Because I will get emails back saying, you know, a typical one is, did the syllabus change? I thought passing was 70%. I'm not here to get you passing on homework. I'm here to get you passing the course. And to do that, you're going to have to score at least really close to 100% on the homework each week, because it shows up later. It's going to show up on the exam, and that's where it really hurts if you don't know how to do it. So there's my aside about homework. So, okay, so short exercise 1-10 gives us a lot of information. We're given total assets. We're given revenues, expenses, dividends. Now, in this homework problem and almost every other homework and real life in general, you're given a lot of information. You don't need it all. So just like real life, there are numbers in this homework problem we don't need. They are not there to trick you. They're there to help you identify, be able to practice identifying what's relevant and what's not relevant. There's information in this homework problem we don't need. So don't feel like you have to use every single number as you go. So we are given this information. We're still to prepare the income statement for the year with the proper headings. Okay, so we are starting on income statement. Income statement is a statement that tells us how we do, results of operation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do on the bottom part of the screen, I have an income statement there. And we have 4 financial statements. Every financial statement has 3 lines at the top of the financial statement. These show up on your homework. They will show up on the exam. These are the easiest points, but every semester people will mess them up because they didn't pay attention and they lose those easy points. So these are easy. The first line of every statement, this is in real life and in your homework, has to be the company's name. As a user of the financial statement, when I pick that financial statement up, I want to know, who's this for? We can't look at a financial statement without knowing who's it for. So the first line has to be the name of the company. That will not vary. It can't be the second line. It can't be the third line. It is the first line. Every statement. This should be, and by the way, this statement here, this statement, all 3 statements we do today, great items to put on your exam reference sheet, because you'll have to do a statement. You very well could have these statements on your exam. These homework problems we're doing today could be on your exam. And if that's the case, you should be celebrating because you can do them. They're easy. Okay, so the name of the company is first. The second line is the name of the statement. So we have income statement. Okay, so it'll change depending on what statement, but every statement starts with the name of the company, then the name of the statement, and then the third line is the date line. Now, the date line is very specific. For an income statement, it's for a period of time. So you will see for year ended or year ended, or you'll see for month ended or for quarter ended. But it makes a big deal to me if I'm looking at an income figure to know, is that monthly, is that yearly, is that quarterly? So when we have an income statement, it covers a period of time. It is key to know what that date line is for each statement. This statement, if you select in my accounting lab or in real life on an income statement, if you simply put December 31st, 2014, that would be wrong. Okay, an income statement has to tell you what period of time you're talking about the income for. So those are the first three lines. They're common to every statement. The date line might be a particular date and time if for a particular statement, or in this case, income statements for a period of time. Okay, so let's go into the income statement. The most basic format of the income statement is revenues minus expenses equals net income. That is basically fundamentally what net income is. Revenues minus expenses equals net income. Now you notice I'm inserting the word minus and equals, just helping you. But when you see an income statement, the first line will be revenues, or sales revenues, or sales. It's something in that neighborhood. Every income statement is going to start with revenues. Okay, now let's start filling in numbers. So back in the problem, revenues, it tells us we earned revenues of $398 million. So that's like the second sentence or so right in the middle there. So I'm going to put 398 as my revenues. So 398 is my revenues that I'm given. It could be sales revenue. Sometimes you'll see just the word sales, but it'll be something very close to that. Now, notice that I've got a dollar sign in front of it. The first line of a statement, the first number in a column gets a dollar sign. I'm telling you that only so you know that these dollar signs are not placed randomly usually in my slides. If you look at Amazon's financial statements or Target's financial statements, first number in a column of numbers has a dollar sign. Will you be tested on that? Absolutely not. Will you have to put dollar signs in your homework? No. Okay, we're not going to grade you on that. I just want you to know as you go forward. So let's say you're taking business policy and strategy at the end, your capstone course, and you have to prepare a financial statement. That's when you're going to need your accounting majors to say in your group to say, oh, you need the dollar sign because it doesn't look right without it. So we have a dollar sign at the first number in the column, but again, you're not being tested on that. It's not relevant on your homework. You put a dollar sign or not, it's not going to, my accounting lab's going to disregard it. But revenues, then you're going to put expenses. Expenses are given in the problem as 167. Now notice, I did not put brackets around expenses or a minus sign. That's because financial statements do not do that. A reasonable, informed user of a financial statement knows that expenses are deducted. If you see an expense with brackets around it, it means it's being added back, which is possible in certain circumstances. So you do not put minus signs around expenses, but you know in your head that you subtract it. So you take your revenues minus your expenses. We draw a single underline to say we're doing a mathematical operation here. We're either going to add the numbers ahead or subtract the number or something. So in this case, we're taking revenues of 398 minus expenses of 167 gives us net income of 231. Now, the last number in a column typically has a dollar sign in front of it. Again, you're not being tested or graded on that. And also, when you come to the end of a statement, There'll be a single underline above the number, and there'll be a double underline below it. That tells you that this is the end of the statement. That's our total. So net income, double underline, that tells you where that net income goes. On this particular problem in my accounting lab, keep in mind my accounting lab is designed to let you show your knowledge and practice. So when in this particular problem they give you assets, you don't need assets. You see, we didn't need assets, we didn't need dividends, but my accounting lab doesn't want to just give you the answer. So my accounting lab, I believe on this particular problem, gives you 5 or 6 rows for revenues, expenses, and net income. Obviously you don't need that. Your first row, after you get through with your statement titles, your first row is going to be revenues, you put that in. Your next row is expenses, you put that in. And then a lot of people will want to put in net income in that third line. Don't do it. Look down to the bottom of this worksheet they're giving you, and in the very bottom, in the right-hand corner, you will see on that bottom row a single underline and a double underline. That tells you that's where the total for the statement goes. So that net income line, the whole line, look for in my accounting lab, look for on the template they're giving you where that single underline is and that double underline, and it'll go in that line. Because if I recall right, I haven't done the homework for a month or two since I assigned it, and I'm pretty sure this one has a couple spaces. So just watch for that double underline and the single underline above it, that's not random. That's telling you where net income needs to go. Okay? Okay, now, let's say we've got this done. We've got my net income. But let's just imagine my revenues in this case were only 7. Okay? So revenues of 7, expenses of 167. What I would have then is my net income would actually be net loss. So I would have loss. And then over in the loss column, I would have 160 in that bottom row, and I would put parentheses around it. I don't use a minus sign, I use parentheses. That tells the user that this is a net loss, not a net income. So in accounting statements, you see parentheses used to denote negatives, not minus signs. Now on our income statement, as we go forward this semester, we're going to see a lot more things on it. We can also have what's known as losses and gains. If I have a building and I sell my building and I have a gain on that building because I sold it for more than I bought it for, that gain is going to go on the income statement. It's the same thing. If I have a car that I use in the business and I sell the car and I have a loss, the loss will go on the income statement. So the income statement includes revenues, expenses, gains, and losses, and net income. Okay, one more thing before we leave the income statement is we have a column called millions. Now, in this one and many times in real life, these numbers are huge. And it doesn't give the investor any additional information. If you're talking about $1.2 billion, the 100,000s don't really matter at that point. So a lot of times we'll have this convention where we drop 6 zeros so we can focus on that which most important. So we see a column here that says millions. That means 6 zeros have been dropped off these numbers. So that first number is not 398, it's 398 million. When you're doing your homework, don't enter the 6 zeros. That is not right. You're actually, if you enter 398 followed by 6 zeros, you're actually entering, I believe, 398 trillion or quadrillion or whatever that would be. So your answer is not right, or not close to right. It's really wrong. So if you ever have, when you're doing your homework and you're like, oh, I don't know should I enter the zeros or not? First clue is, how did we do it in class? We do most of these in class. You can see we're not using the 6 zeros here. Second way, you can also click to help me solve this. It'll pop up a similar problem, and they're not going to use way different numbers. They're going to use similar numbers and see how they are there. So that would be my advice on that. So that brings us to the end of the income statement. What we're going to do now is we're going to forge ahead. We're going to do the statement of retained earnings. And again, and the PowerPoint slides, it kind of summarizes what I'm going to say, so you can feel free to download those if you want. But I'm going to go directly to the statement of stockholders' equity, and we'll go through all of that. So again, we're given a lot of information, and they want us to prepare a statement of retained earnings for the year. So what we're going to do, what I just did is I pushed the homework problem data to the bottom of the screen so that I could have what I'm focusing on at the top. Okay, so first thing, this is the statement of retained earnings. I'm going to start with my title line. Again, easiest points I'm going to get. Start with the name of the company, followed by the name of the statement, followed by the date line. The statement of retained earnings is looking at how retained earnings change during the period. So it's for a date range. So it's going to be for the year ended, for the month ended, for the quarter ended, some period of time. It is not a snapshot of one date in time. It is another one like the income statement, where this is what happened for this year. Now, the statement of retained earnings says what happens to retained earnings during the year. So the basic format says what did we start with in retained earnings, plus what did we earn, minus dividends paid gives us what we ended up with. That's the basic format. So we'll go through it here. Okay, first thing we do is start with beginning retained earnings. So I'll wait for a minute, and then I want to say something about beginning retained earnings versus ending. So I'll pause as I see the pens writing. When we end one year, so when we ended the year December 31st, 2013, and we had an ending balance in account, that's as of midnight that year. Everything's done for that year. Then we start the new year at 12:01. At 12:01, that ending balance from last year becomes this year's beginning balance. So the statement of retained earnings starts with our beginning balance, but it doesn't say beginning balance. It always starts with last year's year ending. These two things are synonymous. Last year's ending is this year's beginning. So even though the formula says beginning retained earnings balance, that's a conceptual thing. In reality, we're going to go grab the number from the last statement is where that's coming from. So this is our beginning retained earnings, and that's coming from last year's statement. We will add net income. We will subtract dividends declared, and that gives us our ending retained earnings. And again, I'll pause for a minute, and then I want to say something about the add in the left here. On this problem, so the basic format for retained earnings, for calculating what we have in retained earnings, is to start with what we had last year. Remember the statement, we're analyzing what happened to retained earnings. Retained earnings is like the cumulative total of our earnings forever less the dividends we've paid out. So what happened this year to it? We start with the beginning balance. We add this net income that we earned. We subtracted the dividends we paid out, and that's what we end up with. On this problem, I wrote add and I wrote less. I did that simply so you know what mathematical operations occurring, so that would not typically be shown in a statement. And again, I can't remember offhand if it's, you're not going to have to choose in My Accounting Lab. It's either, you don't have to say would I include it or not. My Accounting Lab will either have it or not. So when we're filling in numbers, beginning balance given to us, we began 2014 with a retained earnings of $286. That has to be last year's end. So $286 million. We add net income. Now, net income is not given to us. Net income we would take from our income statement. So we would go back to our income statement and get our net income. Now, it's not given here. We think about what net income is. Net income is revenues minus expenses at its most fundamental level. So we have to go into the problem and look at the revenues. They told us revenues during the year were $482 million, and expenses totaled $337 million. So we take the difference between the two. So I take the 482 minus the 337 gives me 145. Okay, that's my net income, and I can use that number on my statement. So in my beginning balance of retained earnings, add my net income. I would subtract net loss if I had net loss. Dividends declared. Now, we do put brackets around dividends, I'm pretty sure. Well, I know they're subtracted, but in real life, we typically see brackets around dividends declared. And again, I think in my accounting lab, you put the brackets, the parentheses around them. Again, if you have any doubt as you go, just click the Help Me Solve This. You'll quickly see if they're using that convention or not. So I take my retained earnings of 286 plus net income minus dividends of 59, and I'm going to get my retained earnings, my ending retained earnings of 372. Notice that I have a single underline above it, a double underline below it with a dollar sign. That tells me this is my ending balance of retained earnings. What we're going to do now is we're going to do we're going to do 2 learning catalytics questions. So this should be popping up here on your screen. So this question, assume that beginning retained earnings is $100. Revenues for the year total $75, while expenses total $50. The company paid out dividends during the year totaling $10. What is net income? Be very careful that you're answering the question that's asked. So the question is, what is net income? This is, you don't want to put the session ID in here. This is asking for the answer. So you should be in the session already. And you can always re-enter you can always put your answer in again if you change your mind. Again, today's participation credit. Okay, we've got about 340 students. We have 197 answers in. So time is ticking. Make sure, remember, today it's participation only, so make sure you have an answer entered because we're going to close this question in another 10 seconds, and then we're going to have one more question pushed out to you before we go back. 5 seconds or so. 5 seconds. What? Well, the session ID you don't need to type. Oh yeah. Right, but they can still see it there because that's what we're sharing. Yeah, the session ID is on the screen even if you're not in Learning Catalytics. The session ID will be on the screen all the time. Okay, so did you close it? Will you close it? The answer here is 25, And net income, they're asking for net income. Net income is revenues minus expenses. So we have 75 of revenue, 50 of expenses, so the answer is 25. So important to know how to calculate net income. So now we're going to do one more question, and again, it builds on the same data set, but it's going to ask a different question. So now we're asking for ending retained earnings. So the same data, assume that beginning retained earnings is 100, revenues for the year are 75, while expenses total 50, and they paid out dividends during the year of 10. What's our ending retained earnings here? Okay, again, and to get your answer entered so you make sure you get credit. Right now, out of about 340 students, we have 270 responses. Again, you have to get an answer in to earn credit. If you're in this room, we still have people here today who can help. Anyone need help? After today, there's no in-room help. You'd have to go to see TechSpot or someone else if they can't help during class. So that's why we made sure we had, so everyone's is good. Okay, let's close this one. Can you refresh it or something? It's not showing on you. Got it. I don't know. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the correct answer is 115. You see the formula there. Beginning retained earnings plus net income minus dividends equals ending retained earnings. So the key on those is to read carefully and read. First of all, I typically look at what's being asked first and then apply the appropriate formula. Okay, so now I'm going to. No. That is okay. Anything to drive you crazy. So you can keep up with what I'm doing. Okay. Okay. Okay, next up. So that was the statement of retained earnings. So we've done the income statement. The income statement net income goes to statement of retained earnings. And then the retained earnings flows to the balance sheet. So balance sheet is up next. Balance sheet, we're going to do a problem, and that's when we'll talk about it. So balance sheet is a representation of the accounting equation, plain and simple. We're going to use the accounting equation to make sure our balance sheet works. We actually have to use it to solve for an unknown number. The balance sheet says, here's our assets, here's our liabilities, here's our equity. Those are the accounts that are on a balance sheet. So we're given short exercise 1-12. We have to do a balance sheet. Now before I get to the actual balance sheet, I'm looking through here. It gives us assets, liabilities, and common stock. It does not give us, there are two elements to equity. Common stock is not the only equity item. Common stock and retained earnings make up equity. So before I get to the balance sheet, I'm going to compute the numbers I need here. We are not told what equity is, just one component. Now remember, equity is common stock plus retained earnings. Last week when we talked about this, we said that common stock, we call it paid-in capital, but for our purpose right now, common stock works. So common stock plus retained earnings. In the problem here, they don't give us retained earnings. So we have to do a little bit of work to get it. We have to apply the accounting equation and a little bit of algebra. Now the problems you do in your homework will be exactly like this. So if the algebra kind of, you're not real comfortable with it, no, it's going to work the same way on your problem. You're not going to have to solve for something different. This is about as complicated as it gets. It's not going to get any more complicated than this. So what we need to do is we need to solve for equity. So to be able to get retained earnings, which we don't have, if we had equity and we have common stock, we can solve for retained earnings. So backing up to that accounting equation, assets equal liabilities plus equity. That's what we're going to start with. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to figure out our assets, figure out our liabilities, and then figure out what our equity is, and back in then to retained earnings. Okay? So assets equal liabilities plus equity. Okay, first question, what are total assets? Well, we have to read through the problem. As this problem is written, all the assets are listed first. That doesn't necessarily happen in other problems, but in this one it does. It tells us at December 31st, they had cash of $21,000. Cash is an asset. Receivables of $17,600, that's an asset. Inventory of $79,000, that's an asset. And the company's equipment totals $185,000. That is also an asset. Okay, so we have our total assets. We add those four numbers together. The cash of $21,000, receivables of $17,600, inventory of $79,000, and equipment of $185,000 gives us $302,600. So that's our total assets. Okay, so we have assets. Now our next question is, what are liabilities? Liabilities are listed, and they're listed next. We have anything that says payable in the title is probably a liability. So we have accounts payable of $25,000 and long-term notes payable of $169,000. So we have a total liabilities of $194,000. Now we have total assets and total liabilities, so we can solve for equity, and we're getting closer. So we have assets of $302,600 plus 109 equals $194,000 plus our equity. So our equity has to equal $108,600. Now, we didn't need just the equity. We need retained earnings. And we know equity is common stock plus retained earnings. So equity, $108,600 equals the common stock we were given of $30,500 plus retained earnings. So what we end up with is retained earnings, $78,100. So we went through all this work to get that one number, $78,100. But if you follow those steps, you'll be able to get it. And that's a really good exercise for applying the accounting equation. We're going to do this throughout the whole semester. Okay, so the $78,100 circle that, keep that, because we're going to see that when we do our balance sheet. What we're going to do now is we're going to prepare the balance sheet. I do not have enough room on the screen to do the balance sheet and display the homework problem, so I'm going to go to kind of a blank slide here, but know that every number I use on the balance sheet is coming from this exercise, just listed right in order there. We went through the assets and the liabilities. So that's where the numbers are coming from, plus the 78,100. Okay, first thing, the easy points on the balance sheet. The name of the company on the first line, the name of the statement on the second line, the date line on the third. Now the balance sheet is the only financial statement that is a snapshot of a moment in time, so it's as of one date. It does not cover a period of time. The balance sheet is saying, what's our balance on this date? So that cash number, that's saying this is how much cash I have on December 31st, not how much cash I had during the year. When I'm looking at a balance sheet, I'm looking at what the company owns on December 31st, what they owe on December 31st, and what the shareholders own on December 31st. So this is the only statement of the four statements that is as of one particular date. Okay. So now, the balance sheet is this assets equal liabilities plus equity. So the left-hand side of the balance sheet is assets. Assets are split up into two groups. We have current assets and long-term assets. These are split up into assets that are going to be used up or converted into cash within a year. And that's based on liquidity. That's its formal term. But right now, it's 1 year or their operating cycle. But for our purposes, 1 year will work just fine. So we start with current assets. Current assets are the most liquid, the ones that are closest to being cash or being turned into cash. The first item on every balance sheet asset is cash. Cash will always be first. Okay? Cash, always. That's a no-brainer. The other order, pretty close to standard, but cash will always be first. So we're always going to see cash first. If you do a balance sheet and you don't put cash first, it's wrong. Okay? It's just cash is first. Cash is king. It has to be first. So we have cash, and then we have receivables and inventory. They're pretty close, so they go up there, and those are our total current assets. So we would add those three numbers together and get our total current assets. So those are the resources that the company has that are cash or very close to it. Then next we're going to list the long-term assets, and we don't have a separate category because we just have one of them. So we have equipment. Equipment lasts more than a year, so it'll be out there. Now, I do have a single underline under equipment, and what I'm doing is I'm adding my total current assets of $117,600 to the equipment of $185,000, giving me total assets of $302,600, and I put a double underline under that because I'm done with that side of the balance sheet. And that $302,600, that should look familiar because that was the total assets that we just did when we were solving for equity. We are done with the left side of the balance sheet. When people talk about a left side of the balance sheet, you hear that sometimes. You can read the Wall Street Journal sometimes or hear a news report and they talk about the left side of the balance sheet. They're referring to assets because that's always going to be the way it is. There's some debate that you could have assets first and then liabilities and equity below it, and sometimes that's done. But most of the time, generally speaking, you're going to see assets on the left and then liabilities and equity on the right. So now we're going to go over to the other side of the accounting equation. So right now we have assets 3026. Now we'll go on to liabilities. And liabilities are broken up into two groups as well, current liabilities and long-term liabilities. And those are based on when they're due. So current liabilities are within a year or the operating cycle. And again, the year will be a good proxy for us. So we have current liabilities first, and those are listed in the problem as $25,000. And then we have long-term liabilities. We don't really need a subtotal because there's only one. So we have current liabilities of $25,000. We're going to add our long-term notes payable of $169,000, giving us total liabilities of $194,000. And that number is exactly what we added up when we were figuring out equity too. So that should look familiar. Now, so we have liabilities. Next up we have equity, because we know the accounting equation is assets equal liabilities plus equity. So the stockholders' equity section, this could be shareholders' equity or stockholders' equity. If it says owner's equity, it's the same general idea, but owner's equity means it's a sole proprietor. This, when we see stockholders' equity or shareholders' equity, that means this is a corporation. Okay, so shareholders' equity, stockholders' equity is two main components at this point. This will get expanded greatly as we go forward. But the fundamental, we have common stock and we have retained earnings. So common stock is given to us as $30,500. And then we have retained earnings. And we just calculated retained earnings when we started this problem, $78,100. That was the number I said circle because we're going to use it. Well, we did. So common stock plus retained earnings equals total stockholders' equity of $108,600. So then our final line on the balance sheet is to show that total liabilities plus total equity, what that total is. And I know before I do any math, it has to be $302,600. It has to be my total assets. It has to be in balance. Assets equal liabilities plus equity. So if I add $194,000 plus $108,600, I will get total liabilities and stockholders' equity of $302,600. Don't have shared yet. Let's put the first question up. Okay, we're going to do a few Learning Catalytics questions now. So we're pushing out the first question to you. And this question is kind of unique in that you need to select, you can select one or more answers. And I'll give you a hint. You have to select more than one answer. So go ahead. You know that where you always have to answer that? Just click on don't show that again and see. Again, choose all that would be on the income statement. Yes, we've done that. And then come back here. And then that one if we have time. If, yeah. I'll just give them to me random. This one you had, I'll give you a hint. You know, we did the income statement, but I also talked about two other things that could be on this income statement beyond what was on the little one we did. So there's actually, you should pick 4 things on this list. going to be closing this one soon, so get your final answers in. I've got about 30 people that need to enter their answers. And remember, once you put your answers in, don't you have to hit submit on this one? Yeah, you have to hit submit on this one to make it go. Still missing about 20 people. And again, it's not accuracy. We're going to close it, so you want to make sure you get credit. So go for your answer, even if you're not totally sure it's right. I will tell you right now, 43% of the class has this question right. So you can change your answer, but it's 4 items. Okay, so we're not going to close it yet. I'm going to keep giving hints. So we're going to see if we can get this to, okay, so I would say 96% of you selected A. So that's right, okay? So that's where, don't change your answer. I mean, and the other one that's an obvious one is expenses, so E. So you know you have to have A and E. And right there it's got 96% and 89% pick those. There are 2 other ones that are related to revenues and expenses. And you could kind of do this. So if anyone wants to change their answer, let's see. Oh, we got some more ones that are right. Now we've got more than half right. Okay. Okay, so let's close it. Just make sure you have an answer. 5 seconds, just hit submit. Whatever you've got, hit submit. Make sure you get credit. Still missing some, but that's okay. Let's go. So the answers are going to be revenues, expenses, losses, and gains. So it would be A, B, E, and G. Okay, so now another one. We'll go to multiple choice. Okay, which statement is the only statement that is as of one particular date? Good. Good. Okay, final 5 or 10 seconds. You want to submit an answer so you get credit. Right now, this isn't too bad of a question, but 85% are right. So one statement, and again, if you're looking back over your notes, it's going to be that one statement that has just the date, not for year ended, but just the date. Go ahead and close it. Okay, so that is the balance sheet. Okay, we have 2 more questions. So this is another multi. Pick what's on the statement. This one says, which of these accounts would be on the balance sheet? When we talk about that, yeah, then as soon as we show the answer, like 10 seconds later, stop the course. Again, this is another one that you need to make your choices and submit. Right now we've got 230. We need another 200 people to submit answers. We have one more question coming after this one. Okay, if you've not answered yet, don't obsess. Just pick an answer and hit submit, okay? Because you want to get participation credit. I just want to get this last question up. So go ahead and close this one. The answer for this one, by the way, on a balance sheet, we're going to have assets, letter C, letter D, liabilities, and letter F, stockholders' equity. Those other items are on the income statement. And then one final question. This relates to this sections 1, 2, 7, and 8. So very specifically, what's due this Saturday? What's due Saturday, basically? Okay, if you're in section 3, I do want to say something about quizzes. Since you're in section, if you're in live right now, you've got to be in sections 1, 2, 7, or 8. In those sections, you come to class live. You either come online or come here in person. That functions as a pop quiz. If you're in section 3, and this is the benefit of the people who are watching this later, you will have a quiz in my accounting lab that is only section 3, and that's only 25 people. It's a very little section, and I will be communicating with you. So I just want to make that clear when you're watching this later that it is. So let's go ahead. Is everyone answered? No? Okay, I'm done. So have a great weekend, and I will see you next week.